Okay, welcome back everyone. This is Mr.Cati. In today's video report, I'm going to be discussing Walmart, the 5 stores that were closed. I'm going to be discussing some Jade Helm, some ISIS, and some conspiratorial elements. Now I'm going to be touching upon some conspiratorial elements that I've already reported on, such as the ISIS code, Jade Helm code, things of that nature, which I'm not going to cover again. I'm only going to cover what I need to cover in order to present this material today. So if you're interested in all these other elements of code, you're going to have to go back and watch a few videos a while back. Now, before I begin and move into the first chart, I would tell you that I'm using this clock. For me, it's a reminder because I had commented in the past, and it's been a while, but in the past and most recently, I've been waking up at 3:33 a.m. in the morning. And when I wake up in the morning, it's as if I have a clear plan already in my mind of what I need to jot down with regard to some things that apparently I was thinking about while I was sleeping. Now, you're getting ready to see some of these observations that have come into existence. But I'm merely going to show those elements from Walmart, Jade Helm, and those things that I've shown. And I would tell you that in the Walmart, the 5 stores that closed, of course I showed those 5 locations, and I commented in that video that those locations were strategic and that they could be used for good or for bad. Now, I thought I showed you what was bad, but we're dealing in a bizarro ritual world where things aren't always the way they appear. And so because we're dealing with ISIS, that, reports of ISIS being in Mexico, because ISIS is a coded construct of the CIA and the Israeli Mossad, there's many things that have come into, that have been shown to us in terms of symbols that's outside the world of code, pure symbols, that when combined with the code conveys an even more deeper message on the broader global conspiracy than I would have ever thought. So I'm going to show you some of those elements today, and I'm going to get back into the 5 Walmart stores, their strategic locations, and how it fits into Jade Helm, ISIS, and the global conspiracy at hand that's still working its way forward towards a 9/24 prophesized asteroid impact in the Atlantic. Like I said, I've got to build into this in layers in terms of how I work your way into this final material, because you do need some basic background in order to understand where I'm going. And since I can't do all of it, I'm only going to cover the basics. And I'm pretty sure if you've been keeping up, it will make sense to you, and you'll be able to follow along without any difficulty. I'm very, very comfortable in knowing that the better ones of you that can think are going to catch on real quick. Now, like I said, what do we know up to this point? Well, with regard to Walmart, Jade Helm, and the 9/24 date, let me show you what I think we need to be looking at in terms of starters. Let's take a look at what we know. Okay, for starters, I'm going to refer to the Star of David as the Shield of David. The Shield of David as a word or as a term, because it is appropriate to use. And in this particular usage, it qualifies because of some things that I'm going to point out. The Shield of David is the 6-pointed star known as the Star of David. Now, first things first, Walmart as a corporation has a sunburst logo that has 6 points to their logo. I showed how the Shield of David superimposed the Star of David over the Walmart logo, clearly showed that it's a hidden Shield of David, Star of David. Now, later, I obviously noted that the Jade Helm logo had once again 6 points, and so I applied the Shield of David to Jade Helm and found once again that it matches. Now, I apologize in this image because When I clicked it to position it to set it, I set it a little bit lower than I should have. You can tell. But anyway, 6 points to the Jade Helm logo, 6 points to the Star of David that I want to refer to as the Shield of David. Now, we also know, because we've been shown in ISIS material since way back when they first started beheading people and came onto the scene, a tripod was associated with ISIS at that time. This is in one of my videos. And we've seen this tripod again here recently in a recent Google Doodle that supported under broadcast the date 9/24. Now, the reason this tripod, this three-pronged spear, known as a tripod, is important is because when I transposed it over the Jade Helm logo, the sword with the 2 arrows, which is part of the 1-2 pattern that I've been following, I noted that the points of the 3 prongs aligned with the center tip of the sword and the tips of the arrows. Now, I looked at this for a while, and then it dawned on me, because of some things that I've been reviewing, and it made perfect sense to me. But it made such perfect sense to me, I realized I would have difficulty in explaining it unless I presented you some material to support what I'm getting ready to show you. Now, I would tell you that this same tripod, 3-pronged spear, that the center point is shaped in the shape of a triangle or a pyramid, and that there are 3 distinct points to this, which would of course denote the pattern of 3 which we're in. But if you recall, here recently, the 3x3 Masonic magic square that totaled 15 in all directions showed and emphasized initially the numbers 3, 5, and 7. And by applying the Albert Pike quote clue, it revealed the 3, 5, and 7, 9 for the magic square, which then set us up for identifying 924, because all of these 3, 5, 7, and 9 adds to 24. Now, I would tell you that while 924 is associated with an ELE event, an asteroid impact into the Atlantic Ocean, we need to separate, even though it is still in play and still a matter of the larger conspiracy, you have to keep that in mind for the future. The reason I ask you to keep that in mind for the future, because I don't want you to mix it in with this ISIS material beforehand. Now, to truly understand what's going on, I'm going to have to ask you to please separate the 924 asteroid impact event from the ISIS, Jade Helm, and the 5 Walmart stores. You have to separate the 924 event. Now, it's still, I believe, a future marker. So I believe the false flag elements that are involved in ISIS and what's going on with Walmart and Jade Helm, they're the false flag side. The 924 is the disaster that will be used in many ways. But before they ever get to that asteroid date, many things, like I said, have to take place beforehand. And so this is what's important. But ultimately, when I discovered that the 3-pronged tripod aligns over the Jade Helm logo, made me realize something once I separated the 924 event and merely looked at it as the ISIS, Walmart, Jade Helm, three elements. I said, what does it show us? And so I already knew the strategic locations were noteworthy. And while I did put nuclear blast patterns on all of them, all 5 of them, and they're still valid, I would tell you, as nuclear blast patterns, but from a whole different perspective. Because back when I did that video showing how the grid ley lines aligned with all 5 stores, that set me up for the suggestion that they were strategic because of their location, and realized that those locations could be utilized for good or for bad. We're going to have to keep what's good and what's bad in mind, because I'm going to have to redefine it based on the rules that they themselves are applying to what's good versus what's bad. They've twisted it backwards. What's bad is really good, but it's bad at the same time. It's very dualistic, and that's why I'm going to have to explain it. But since I can show it, oh, buddy, you better believe I can show it. So I'm not going to have any trouble supporting my case in what I just said. With that being stated, let's move into the very first chart that's key in understanding what, as we continue along in this information. These are things that you should know or should have known already, but the Jade Helm logo and the three-pronged tripod superimposed over it led to this ISIS observation that leads us into Mexico, and once again is going to have to recover the 5 Walmart stores, but from a different perspective. So that's where I'm going with this. So let's move into the next chart. Okay, to get this going, let me just cover some basic elements here that you need to grasp. We already know that the Walmart logo matches the Shield of David, Star of David logo, that also more or less matches the Jade Helm 6 points to the sword and 2 arrows. Now, I know that all those are related in that way. The tripod, the 3-pronged tripod, comes into a different way, but it's still a tool and implement of war. And so when I looked at this and I realized I had a sword that comes from the Jade Helm logo, along with 2 arrows. And it's of course right there in the Jade Helm logo is the 1-2 code. Now, we also have the Shield of David, okay, and then we have this tripod, which is a 3-pronged spear. Now, what I would tell you is that when I realized the components of what was here, symbols, it conveyed a message for things that we already should know based on the code, and or what these, we know Jade Helm's a big exercise. And we also know that Jade Helm is coded, showed us 924, and we also know that in this image of the tripod, the 3-pronged spear, the very center point is shaped like a pyramid, which is the finding that we found in the Masonic 3x3 magic square that highlighted the numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9, which added to 24, thus producing a 924, which was able to be verified and proved because it showed it 3 ways for both 924 and 915. Now I would tell you, I asked you to keep 924 as a separate event for a future, separate from what I'm getting ready to discuss, because you see, I'm in the area. The disaster is one thing. The false flags are another, and because it's a big conspiracy, they all come together at some point, and so you try to keep it in mind. But okay, with everything that you've seen here, what I didn't point out before is that Walmart has closed 5 stores. There are 5 geographic locations that I stated could be strategic. I showed the blast patterns, told you why I thought they would be good targets. As I stated, I thought they could be used for good and for bad. But we're dealing in a very bizarre ritual world of the New World Order and the psycho world, where bad means good and good means bad, and sometimes good and bad means the same thing. And that's actually what we've got here. We got us a 2-for-1. We got good and bad that equates to the same thing. Now, how can that be? Well, I'm getting ready to show it to you and explain it to you. Because, you see, we've been given the components to be able to see what I'm getting ready to prove to you. Okay? And the proof in the pudding was in this tripod, 3-pronged spear. Because when I realized that it matched in the way that it matched, and when I realized that the center component brought us what's the key focus item, the 924 disaster. But the elements of war and a false flag and some other clues are right here in our face, and it just took me a while. But when I got into the ISIS Mexico research, this is when all of a sudden I found the 6th point. Because you see, this ritual has 5 points already identified. But Mexico and the El Paso observation is a 6th point, which points back to the Shield of David, Star of David, which is consistent with everything I've been showing up to date. But this 6th point, the 6th point of this star is El Paso, which points to ISIS, a CIA Mossad construct, which means it's properly coded already, okay, for all the right players to be in the right place, to be doing what I'm getting ready to explain. Because to understand this false flag and conspiracy involving the Walmart stores and their locations and ISIS and Mexico, we're going to have to refer to this tripod as the key clue that broke it for me, that allowed me to see that in basic military tactics 101, probably even before you get to 101, you should know about the three-pronged attack. It's a military, it goes way back in ancient history. But the three-pronged attack was basically you got two flanks on the side and you got a center element that pushes up through the middle and supports either the left or the right, depending on whether they need support or not. Okay, but the whole objective is they use a three-pronged attack to push through a major area of the enemy, and so they pushed through the enemy in this way. They found it to be successful. Ergo, because it was used over and over, and many people learned it and used it as well to be successful in the very basic years of warfare, where tactics were actually brought into play, strategies and tactics. Then this three-pronged spear denotes a military tactic, and since it's a military tactic associated with ISIS, I said a three-pronged attack. And then all I had to do was look at the map, and it all made sense to me. And all the 5 Walmart stores made sense to me. And then this is why I'm getting ready to explain. It's good and bad at the same time. It's a 2-for-1. And so, with that in mind, let me take you to the map that's going to introduce El Paso, Texas, and the site of the ISIS camp that supposedly is a target for some nuke, okay? But all that concern, ISIS. And just to prove my point, February 27th, USA Today. USA, race to stop ISIL in USA, okay? Now, main top page covers Tibet. It's already at 2,500 deaths, and although I know it's larger, a lot of things been going on, and I know this. Baltimore included is ritual play, and I'm working on a video to present that, because that's a different part. That's the race war ticket that I've already said is in play, because the blacks are ritualized to participate, and as they die in these race-related events, and or if they can create the mass violence that the government wants them. You see, they want to be justified in killing blacks wantonly. That's where they want to lead. They want to be able to shoot indiscriminately, basically black people, and shoot them to death. Now, once that begins, it's a whole nother story. But see, that's a whole nother conspiracy that I'm going to have to discuss in another video that I'm working on. Right now, I want you to keep in mind that the key clue to what I'm getting ready to show you came from the ISIS tripod superimposed over the Jade Helm logo, that matched up in such a way that I realized it showed a basic military tactic of a three-pronged attack. And to understand this three-pronged attack, this is where the 5 Walmart stores and their locations come into play, and this is where I show you the map to prove it. Okay, final chart, people. Now, in the charts leading into this one, as I showed the build-up, there are some charts that I put in there that I was going to use as talking points, but I didn't want to run any longer than I'm having to, so I'm going to just condense it. But I put those charts in this video specifically so that you know that what I'm getting ready to say is proven by those charts and your own Google Earth observation. So what I'm getting ready to say is a fact. From the left of this three-prong attack, we have Pico Rivera, California. I showed you that a nuclear blast in this location in the valley would inundate this entire region. It was a centralized road network system that, once taken out, eliminates the ability to send anything to the east. It prevents mobility north and south. This is a control point. This is why this is important. But okay, this is the left side of the prong. This point right here is El Paso, Texas, where apparently on the Mexico side there's an ISIS camp, and this made sense because, once again, the road network system, once you eliminate this location or control it for mobility, it's either yours or you're preventing anybody from using it. So there's, like I said, the good guys would want to use it one way, the bad guys would want to use it another. But we've got some other clues here to show you, because you see, ISIS is, of course, a CIA Mossad construct. CIA is American, which means that, you see, ISIS is the pretend enemy that's being used in order that the CIA can then fight with the military and all of the things that are ongoing in order to counter it. But both are being controlled by the same side, the Zionist. The six-pointed star is who is in control of both sides. Now, ISIS, the road network at that location in El Paso as a strategic target, once again eliminates and removes traffic east and west. And when you look at the other available road networks, you see we're talking very mountainous, treacherous mountains, and Mexico, and so the roads are very limited. And so, once again, if you're dealing with an invasion, you've got to have your front, your attack lines delineated. And once again, as we move over to the right to Odessa and Midland, Texas, the site of another Walmart store closing. Odessa is right next door. And didn't explosives just go missing from Halliburton, located right there in Odessa? And isn't Midland next door? And wasn't there reports of military activity, increased military activity at the Midland store? It only makes sense. They're preparing these stores. The good guys and the bad guys are the same people. Okay? Now, because see, they got to create the war. They got to allow the enemy to have a plan that they're going to allow them to succeed, because the inside element is working one side and the other side is working the other. Okay, once again, Midland, aside from its strategic location, once again with a road network system, once this is effectively blown or destroyed or controlled, it eliminates any and all east-west whatever. And so if you're looking for goods or anything, the other road networks are going to be up here in what I call free America. Below the red line is going to be occupied America. Okay? Now, I'm going to point this out because as I get to the tip of the spear, which is Tulsa, Oklahoma, once again, it's strategic because of its road networks. And I've shown this, and I'm asking you to take a look on your own. Don't trust me. Don't take my word for it. Look it up, and you're going to see I'm telling you the truth. Now, because Tulsa, Oklahoma is in fact the tip of the spear, it's a control point, once again, for the three-pronged attack. It's where they need to make their furthest advance for strategic purposes of control. Now, what are they controlling? Okay, let's work our way down to Livingston. As we get to Livingston, Texas, there's an observation that can be made much better if you blow this up a lot and go to Google Earth, that we can see that Houston, this blue line is a major road that when I realized all the roads that were destroyed and impeded and people had to reroute and you couldn't take direct routes anymore, you'd have to go 100 or 5, 6, 7, 8, 800 miles around a number of states to get somewhere because of the terrain and the road network systems. By effectively cutting off the tip of the spear there and Livingston, Texas, it revealed to me something that's an observation that I'm going to share with you here. An all-out attack on America you would think would want to decimate the major populated areas, key infrastructure. I mean, blow the hell out of everything and then come in and deal with what's left over. No, this plan is very, very detailed just from the perspective that I applied a three-pronged spear and a three-pronged military tactic attack to see that when we get to Livingston, it also, in that area, aside from controlling a major water source, would control or destroy a major network road system. Now, this would be where the right flank begins. This is where the left flank begins, and this is the center. Just about all of Texas is in the center attack plan. But here's an observation. Houston, if they're going to do false flag nuclear bombs in these possibly 6 locations, they avoided Houston for a reason. First, it's a major port city, so an invading force that's coming in by Navy would need this in order to bring in their tanks and all of the things that they would need to move in, if indeed this is the way they're coming. Okay? Same over here. Even though this explosion would blow up the Special Operations Command and things of that nature, I believe it's done in such a way that, because you see, once you look at the road systems in Florida again, you're going to see that, well, and I would encourage everybody, probably use a bigger bomb than I did, because if you do, you'll realize that what I'm getting ready to say is going to fit. A bomb big enough right here effectively impedes Interstate 75 and Interstate, the road that leads to the west, to the east coast. But right here, by blowing this area and the road and that network system of roads, they would, once an occupying force came in, it could then move south and east and create, and all the millions of people down in the Keys and along the coast would be trapped. It would be, I would think, to the advantage of the enemy to eventually extend this line from Brandon, Florida, further over to the East Coast. But by then, there's a number of things. They're doing things for a reason, and this is what's important. When you study Florida, you realize that by destroying this road network system right here, nothing is going to be able to move south from the north of it. Nothing is going to be moving down this road coming from the east. The only road network is going to be Interstate 95. Now, there's a bunch of county and state roads in between, small. But when you're dealing with mass evacuation, the interstate freeways serve as the main mode down there. I was in the Keys during a hurricane and had worked my way back to Orlando, Florida. And it was the longest ride on earth, and problems. People running out of fuel, etc. But okay, once a bomb goes off in Florida, and effectively you've cut off what you've done here, it sets up what I believe the other scenario in this conspiracy for the state of Florida to then invoke and begin their measures, either working with this enemy, claiming they're working against the enemy, to then start rounding up dissidents. Because once the road networks are constricted and you have to go down the only roads available that they control, they can round you up and terminate you or execute you at any time from that point forth. Now, below the red line, occupied United States. This would take in New Orleans. This line, by the way, runs through the BP oil disaster, New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, as it works its way to Livingston. So everything, Interstate 20 that runs from, or Interstate 10, Interstate 20 that runs all the way across, by controlling this area, once they come in, they would have to control all the way over to New Orleans. But in doing so, the enemy would control all of that terrain. They would have to push in, and how the attack goes, because you see, here's the part that you need to keep in mind. Mexico, if they're massing troops in Mexico, we should know about it. Okay? Satellite images, etc., etc. If there's Navy Chinese, Korean, Russian ships off of the west coast, anywhere down in this area, where they might, make landings. And obviously, this side of, you wouldn't want to do the tip of the Baja. You'd need to be on the mainland side, but they'd still have to come around. And so when I looked at this coming around and the road network systems, all the roads below this mountain, on this side of the mountain range, all the road network systems lead you basically to El Paso. Now, there are roads that lead you, small roads that take you other, but El Paso is a major coming to from Mexico. Now, the other is right over here, which is Monterrey. And so, once again, if you blow this road network system so they can't go that way, they're going to have to come this way. And so, if the invasion comes from the Pacific through Mexico mainland, eventually they would have to come from the south tip of Texas, Nuevo Laredo, but Monterrey would be the key point. But you got to understand that aside from Houston, they've got Corpus Christi as port cities, and so the only way Navy ships carrying all that cargo and crap, although they could airdrop them, but it would take quite a few airdrops to do a brigade of tanks, and so they got to be coming in somehow. And if they're coming in on ship, they got to go through the Panama Canal. And once again, the Panama Canal, they know what's on the Pacific side coming this way. So once again, there is no way in hell an invasion can begin that they didn't know was going to begin. That's point number one. Point number two, which is really my point number one, is that they allowed Houston to be spared, and if they're going to use a nuke, they're going to use it over here in Livingston, because aside from blowing the network system there, it once again would maintain, because of the road networks and the terrain, would keep the enemy on that side easily. And so whatever kind of massive thrust, it's going to have to be quick, because if they explode nuclear bombs, well, then you got to, they couldn't. Now, if the invasion begins and we see all these spots blow up, this is the part that I was talking about. It's good and bad at the same time. If you're the attacking force and you're on the offense, you would want to control these points to support your three-pronged attack and your follow-on invasion force. You have to control some territory with some initial shock troops, and if you committed nuclear blasts at these points initially, and then control them from that point forth, being able to deal with, because if they're going to send in shock troops, they're going to be well equipped, the airborne troops, special ops types. And so the key thing to also note is that Jade Helm, in terms of their planning, has centralized, according to their own plan and their own PDF, most of the activity for Texas. Now, there are other states, but I believe those are tactical positioning of American military troops in positions for the follow-on, because if this is an invasion plan, it has to begin and then move along based on some timing. There's a timing factor. And so it just can't, you just can't explode 6 nuclear bombs in 5 Walmart cities and in an El Paso where ISIS is located and expect, how's the invasion military force going to show up? It's going to have to show up from the West Coast and the East Coast. But the fact that they've effectively destroyed the ability to, mobility-wise, move south, and it's L.A., they could be also effectively destroying the docks and the ports in L.A. so that it can't be used coming in. Or they did this and blew this one so that because once you study the network system here, depending on the size of the bomb, allows them to either control or destroy. And I believe that what we're seeing here is the ISIS, CIA, Mossad false flag plan that involves nuclear explosions at perhaps all 5 of those Walmart stores, to include the El Paso ISIS location, so that it creates this 3-pronged front for their invasion that's been planned for them. And so if Jade Helm and everything we're seeing now, we're being told is for training. How can it be for training if it matches this three-pronged invasion plan that I'm sure you're going to say, well, that's a theory, Mr. Cat-Eye. Well, I didn't create these 5 Walmart stores any more than I created the ISIS camp, and I didn't create the three-prong attack design, okay? I'm really connecting the dots. And speaking of connecting the dots, I'm going to conclude on this one. The tip of the spear to Livingston, tip of the spear to Livingston over to Midland, Texas, forms a triangle, a 3-pointed triangle or a pyramid that points up proper. And what's at the center, at the heart of this triangle? Dallas, Texas. And Dallas, once again, if you look at the road network system, they have to protect it. Because for follow-on purposes, you see, by controlling Dallas eventually within this spectrum of the tip of the spear, you control all what's going to come this way, in other words, nothing's going to be able to come into Texas because they're not, if they truly have a control, they're not going to be able to allow it. And so the major road systems aren't going to, that's why they're under attack, the major control cross points, so that once they're destroyed, rerouting is going to, and so an enemy coming using tanks down here, in view of the fact that the Special Ops Command and all the airborne missions are planned for this area, this is going to be the heart of the battle, Texas. And this is where the enemy's main invasion element is going to come. And they're either going to come by sea and or by land. And if they come by land, they'll come this way from the Pacific side, come over the mountains, hit Monterey, and then work their way into Mexico. But all of this, you see, this is what I talk about, the timing factor. You just can't explode nuclear bombs in six places thinking, well, okay, we've done that, and then it's going to take you weeks to move an invasion of tanks and all the BMPs and all the things that are going to be used, you got to offload them over here somewhere. Then you got to marshal them and fuel them and all that takes time. People got to sleep and eat and all things. And so there would be indications in Mexico that all this is going on. And suppose they know that it's going on. Because you see, in the world of the big conspiracy, what's going on here can be made to look like a false flag, but it's actually the New World Order impeding the attack that's coming against them and against America from China, Russia, and any other elements that I guess are involved in the attack. Because this design and these locations clearly point that they don't want anything to move north or south from this given point. They want control here, left and right, control here, control here, control here, and control here. Once you control Florida, this is when I believe, like I said, the national emergency that would be declared. The people fleeing, eventually, you're not going to be able, imagine trying to flee, going somewhere else, and you don't know that you're driving into occupied enemy territory. At some point, major road systems along this Gulf side would have to be shut down. And that's going to impede all kinds of things. And so it sets up the battlefront, and that's what's important. It sets up the battlefront for the initial invasion attack. This is the tip of the spear. These are the left and right. It matches the three-pronged attack that is part of the Jade Helm. And so they've got the sword, the arrows, the shield, and the spear. We got ISIS, CIA, Mossad, and the CIA on our side is basically controlling the military that's going to counter this force. But all of it's going to be made to be, you see, imagine there's an invasion coming that they know. And so they're going to blow these locations to begin the play. But in blowing these locations, they also prevent, if you were to be on the defense, if you're on the good guy defense side against the enemy, you would blow these spots to control them and contain them in the heart of Texas to create a massive kill zone where you can decimate your enemy and defeat them. And then all America and whoever leads the victory can, run for president and win. Okay? Texas. Isn't it amazing that Texas ends up in the main center stage for the battle? And that Dallas, Texas, is at the heart of a triangle that's created by connecting the lines between Livingston and Midland. Now, I know all of this is ritually coded and ritually related, but it's related to a 9/24 date of an asteroid impact somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean that creates a massive tsunami. And so, what's going on here? This is the invasion, the false flag side that's being orchestrated for us. What goes on north of the occupied area, because this is going to be occupied America basically, okay? And what's north, and so with what's going on in Baltimore, the return of the race riots, violence, things of that nature, that's to me something that was expected, because that part's also a ritual element being carried out by the players themselves. And so while America deals with an invasion coming from the south, America is going to be killing itself in the north and all the other major cities, because as you know, if a race war gets out of control, once it begins, and there's wanton killing in the way that, well, that people have envisioned, it's not going to stop. People are going to want to save people and kill those that are trying to do the killing, and then the people that get killed are going to want to, you know, their people are going to want revenge, and so it's never going to end. They want a race war to create that anarchy and chaos, and keep it in mind, it's all a distraction from what? From the major disaster that's coming 9/24. That's what it's all about, because it's coded into the same Jade Helm logo and code that I've shown up to this point. So now you see the three-prong attack. You see what I believe Jade Helm represents, but from a false flag, the ISIS, the CIA, Israeli Mossad, they've created both sides of the enemy, the opposing force and the counter force, and so it's staged theatrics, but it's deadly because they're dealing in nuclear bombs, and when the invasion begins, they're going to be real bullets, people, not blanks, okay? Real invading troops. And yeah, I know Americans are stand-up people and will probably be able to do a number of things, but not the way I believe everybody thought, because right now we've spent since March contemplating and talking all kinds of things, and this is what we should have been talking about all the time. And I hope now that you've seen it, that you're willing to talk about it. But if you do nothing more, do your own road network system research, and you'll see that everything I said about destroying these locations impedes traffic in a big way for the good guys and the bad guys. But since it's the good guys and the bad guys combined into one, who did the nukes? They're going to blame, I'm sure, ISIS in a cave in Mexico with a laptop defeated NORAD and was able to get their hands on all these nukes and this invading army all from a cave somewhere in Mexico. That's the story they're going to tell us, so that they can go to war with Russia over there, you know, because it's all bullshit, okay? This, though, is the three-prong attack that you need to keep in mind when you look at this tripod that I believe is directly linked to Jade Helm. And now that you've seen it, I've shown it. This is it, people. This is the plan somewhere before 9/24. With that in mind, thank you for watching. Thank you for considering this material. Until next time, this is Mr. Cati saying stay safe, but stay alert.